So it unfolded over the course of several hours. Justice Michael Lee gave quite a lengthy exposition of his finding, which was effectively only an excerpt of his findings this afternoon. But what we now know is that the federal court has found on the balance of probabilities that Bruce Lehrman raped Brittany Higgins at Parliament House in 2019. Now, early on in Justice Michael Lee going through his remarks, he provided this assessment of two of the key witnesses, two of the key people giving evidence in this case.
To remark that Mr. Lehrman is a poor witness is an exercise in understatement. As I'll explain, his attachment to the truth was a tenuous one, informed not by faithfulness to his affirmation, but by fashioning his responses in what he perceived to be his forensic interests. Ms. Brittany Higgins, Mr. Lehrman's accuser, was also an unsatisfactory witness who made some allegations that made her a heroine to one group of partisans, but when examined forensically have undermined her general credibility to a disinterested fact finder.
So that was early on in the remarks being given. And then fast forward a couple of hours, a very definite statement from Justice Michael Lee was made.
Mr. Lehrman raped Miss Higgins. I hasten to stress this is a finding on the balance of probabilities. This finding should not be misconstrued or mischaracterised as a finding that I can exclude all reasonable hypotheses consistent with innocence. As I've explained, there's a substantive difference between the criminal standard of proof and the civil standard of proof, and as a tribunal of fact, I have only to be reasonably satisfied that Mr. Lehrman has acted as I have found, and I am not obliged to reach that degree of certainty necessary to support conviction on a criminal charge.
Justice Michael Lee just speaking this afternoon, giving his finding in the defamation claim that Mr. Lehrman brought against Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson, which ultimately has failed. And the evidence had proven Network 10's substantial truth defence in this finding. So what actually was being investigated here? What was actually found in this defamation suit today? Well, Michael Finch is a defamation lawyer and joins us on the line. Michael Finch, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Paul.
Certainly intense national interest, kind of an extraordinary thing to watch and witness Justice Michael Lee's comments over the course of what was 2 or 3 hours worth of remarks. What are your initial takeaways from what is quite an extraordinary case?
Well, that's right, Paul. This is certainly a sensational case, and if not the case of the decade, then certainly the one that we've been paying a vast amount of attention to over the last couple of years. And certainly within the last couple of months, it has been one which has been fraught with all sorts of difficulties for Justice Michael Lee. And there is, for me, no surprise that he's taken up what I understand to be 328 pages or so in drafting his judgment. And that's also why it may have taken him many hours to deliver that this morning. The outcome that we received today was something which I can tell you, even from those lawyers within my office and myself, watching quite intently to see what would be the outcome. We were hanging on the nail's edge the entirety of the day this morning. We could not necessarily determine which way he was going to go. But I thought he took a very well-considered approach in his determination, in making the very difficult determination, and I must say, of that Mr. Lehrman had, in fact, at the civil standard, and very important to say, at that civil standard, raped Miss Higgins.
So it's, and we can stress that quite a bit there, that of course there had previously been a criminal trial that had been abandoned due to juror misconduct, but this is a civil case on the balance of probability. So what was really that job ahead of Justice Michael Lee? What did he have to establish in making this finding today?
Yeah, certainly. So, and that really is the key point here. This is not a criminal proceeding. And Paul, as you quite rightly said, there was a first attempt at a criminal proceeding against Mr. Lehrman on the question of an alleged rape. That was abandoned, and it was abandoned quite relevantly because of issues with the jury after Lisa Wilkinson gave her acceptance speech to the Logies, which consequently derailed those proceedings and then caused the ACT prosecutor, Mr. Drumgold, to abandon those proceedings. Now, that's a bit of digression from the ultimate question which you've asked, which is what was it that Justice Michael Lee had to determine, and what did he deliver today? Well, he had the difficult role of determining whether, based on all the circumstances and the facts available to him, and what he quite candidly has determined was really unsatisfactory evidence on witness accounts by some of the key witnesses, being both Bruce Lehrman and Brittany Higgins, that whether or not he can be satisfied that there is or was a rape, and that it's a rape within the understanding of what the common person within Australia would understand that word to mean. Now, obviously, if we had a criminal proceeding, the statute is very clear as to what elements need to be made out and how do you determine whether or not a sexual assault or a rape, as we would commonly refer to it as, had taken place. Now, what Justice Michael Lee turned his mind to was adopting an approach whereby he considered some of the elements that are commonly referred to throughout the various jurisdictions of Australia, and determining what a sexual assault would be. And in doing that, he came up with a device for being able to determine whether or not there had been a rape within the common understanding of that term. It's very key to understand that in defamation, it's not necessarily about what the specific definition of something is. So, a sexual assault in the criminal context is not necessarily the exact same as it would be under the common understanding. We often within the defamation realm sort of call it the pub test, and it's kind of would the common person say that this amounts to that, or was it a rape, was it not? Well, how he was able to get past the crude approach of just the pub test was to say, okay, well, I'm going to put three different elements to this. The first element was whether or not the actual act of a sexual activity took place. Now, looking at all the different circumstances of the events back in 2019, where you have two staff members going out for drinks, they've been seen by third-party witness accounts to have been fairly affectionate towards each other. There had been what was submitted as a pash at one point between them. There was witness accounts of both Bruce and of Brittany touching each other's legs with their hands in public forum. And there was, the purchasing of drinks by Bruce apparently for Brittany. And then as the story goes on, they then seek out to find a private place, that place being Parliament House. And that's where the impugned acts take place. Now, the circumstances to which Brittany says she found herself in was she's completely inebriated. She wakes from sort of a dizzy daze and finds Mr. Lehrman on top of her, sexually assaulting her. She's partially unclothed, and she's on the couch effectively, and not really sure how or why she's where she is. Whether or not all of that was accepted by Justice Michael Lee was not entirely the case, but he was able to say, well, yes, the two of them were in that room alone in a private place after having been affectionate and being intoxicated. And more likely than not, yes, the act of a sexual nature did occur. He then turned his mind to two other elements. The next element being, okay, well, if there was a sexual act, was there consent? And that is a element which is consistent within the criminal most criminal legislation around sexual assaults as well. Now, in this circumstance, he came to the determination that Ms. Higgins was not capable, or she did not give consent. He found that whilst she was not credible in most of the evidence she gave, she was capable of giving very credible evidence in respect to this one element, which he said had a ring of truth.
Michael Finch is your guest this afternoon, defamation lawyer. We are stepping through some of the elements of the defamation case that Bruce Lehrman brought against Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson. Ultimately, that defamation suit has failed. Michael Finch, where to from here? Might we see an appeal? Might we see costs being borne by one party or another when it comes to legal fees? What might come of this?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt in my mind that we are likely to see some form of appeal, if not then just the threat of it. With a matter of this magnitude, it's something that you can likely bet on that we'll see something come. Now, as to the question of costs, well, costs follow the event in civil proceedings, and given that Mr. Lehrman's lost entirely, there's two parties there that will be certainly out to get their costs, Channel 10 and Lisa Wilkinson. And you can bet that they have spent a considerable amount of money in the defense of their case in this matter.
So that's now, would that be another sort of hearing to then decide on whether indeed costs have to be awarded?
Certainly, yes. Costs are always in the discretion of the court. It's not something that is necessarily granted or given, but in most cases, unless there are exceptional circumstances, you will have the award of costs to the successful party.
All right, so to watch the space on that front. Michael Finch, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Michael Finch is a defamation lawyer, giving you some insight into the finding today. Bruce Lehrman failing in his defamation suit against Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson. Justice Michael Lee finding on the balance of probabilities. Again, this is a civil defamation suit. This is not a criminal hearing, but finding on the balance of probabilities that Bruce Lehrman raped Brittany Higgins.